and achieving success in construction. We have two very quick turnaround panels on this. Shanaz Chennai, who's the CEO of Youth Build Ventures, please welcome her to the stage. Jackie Ducker, Executive Director, Customer and Products at CITV. Luke Emery, I can just make sure that I've got everybody in the right room. Jackie Ducker and Luke Emery, and who is a carpenter at FMB, the member company Lowry Building. Welcome to you. And Amos is going to come later on. I'm easily confused with a lot of it. Right, so we know that we have a problem here in terms of attracting people to work in the industry. So I'd just like to start with you, if I may, Shanaz, first of all, and from Youth Build, because I think that is a good place to start. And so what attracts people or not into the industry? How do they perceive it?
That's a difficult question. I think there's many ways in which we can answer it, but I think the mere fact that we're still having to ask that question, I'm going to address it with two very simple and actionable items. And I think one of those is just collaborating in the way we inspire people, right? So early engagement, going into schools very early, but actually going in there to represent the industry, not yourselves, not your company, not your trade, but the industry and the vast array of opportunities it offers young people. I think, we have to recognize that we are an incredible industry and we have a lot of options for people that they don't see at first sight. And I think it's our duty to go out there and really promote the options available, but also the resilience that we have as an industry, the opportunities, the culture that we're trying to facilitate, the fact that you can come in with very low skill and really progress within the industry if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to put the time in, etc. So that's one key element. But I think also having very clear career pathways and facilitating a culture of lifelong learning, I think is really important. So actually people recognizing that if they do come in, they will be supported to grow, and they will have options to grow, and that could be somewhere they end up for time to come.
Just a couple of figures that are leaping out to me. About a quarter of the current workforce is aged over 55, and 10% of the workforce 16 to 24. So it's 6% people of colour and only 14% are women. Some thinking to do there, Jackie.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for inviting us here today, because actually making construction the top career choice for our young people is critical to our future success. And things that we've been really successful in are things like the CITV Go Construct website, which is dedicated to young people. We have about over 1.1 million visits per year for people to go and find there's about 180 jobs on there at the moment. So actually, I know that people in this room are desperate for bricklayers and carpenters and general builders. But there's so many other range of jobs which are available to young people, and we've got to inspire and raise that awareness through giving information when people are young, inspiring them through the ambassadorial work that you do, that I do, that everybody involved in our fantastic industry can really help to excite people, so that young people think, actually, this is a future for me. Chris Carr mentioned earlier in one of the earlier pieces about making it a career which is really respected, and actually people being proud to be part of the infrastructure and the massive opportunity here in construction for us.
And a very brief question: do you think a license would help?
Well, I think that anything that raises the standard and gives the quality mark will help, because it gives that accreditation of this is something I can be proud of. So yeah, I do. Actually.
Luke Emery is Master Builder Awards Apprentice of the Year for 2021. Luke, as a young person, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, where did I start, I suppose? I think whenever we talk about tackling the shortage, I suppose, in apprenticeships, we have to naturally look at the apprenticeship. This is the first point of contact that any young person is going to have, likely coming into the construction industry. And what I would say, in my personal opinion, would be that I believe that a lot of these courses that we offer to our young people are not correctly weighted. And when I talk about weighted, what I mean is, if I was to start my endeavour to enter into a trade from the age of 18, as we talked about, there's an incredible shortage of people between 16 and 24. So if I was to start my endeavour into construction at the age of 18, having, say, finished my A-levels, to become what would be considered qualified as a carpenter or builder, which we see here statistically 42% of companies are actually struggling to find, I have to do 4 years within a college to actually obtain the correct qualification. Now that is with essentially 4 years on-site experience. However, if I wanted to manage said carpenters, it is required in a lot of cases that may only require 1 year experience through a placement. Now, if you were to present that to anybody, I think common sense would dictate that if you were to ask an 18-year-old, okay, what do you want to do? 4 years experience or 1 year's experience? And you tell them the benefits of each, well, they would say, well, the 1 year experience that I will get to double my salary, I think would be a lot more sensible. So I think whenever we look at this question, it's important that it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be perplex. I believe it can be sorted at a very basic level. To be quite honest, and I think as well, what we talked about before, there's a lot of principles whenever we discuss licensing that can be translated over to an apprenticeship. And what I mean by that is, whenever yourself, Tanya, correctly says that we have to change the attitude to we want to be better. When you rely on what somebody can put in front of you on an A4 piece of paper to say, I am qualified, and that means to say that, okay, when I talked about weighting of the subjects, a lot of the qualification derives from what is your bookwork like. Now, I can understand, I definitely wouldn't dare ever downplay the benefits of the academic side of the qualification. However, when we talk about actually our qualification, you say, okay, well, it's good that you've done all this work on health and safety and all this work on sustainable building methods and all the rest, but what's that going to do when I ask you to hang a door? What's that going to do for me when I ask you to install skirting? This is what I mean, and I just think it's...
Isn't that where the customer review comes in, though? I mean, it's not one thing or the other, is it? You know, it's a combination of things.
Sorry, could you get started then?
Well, isn't that where the customer review comes in, and that you're showing them pictures or videos or whatever of your work? Surely it's not one thing or the other then.
Well, yeah, it could be, but then if we're talking about what the customer wants in terms of the standard of how they want their work to be completed, that presents itself as a bit of a difficulty when you say, okay, I'm looking to do a bit of work for you, but I'm not quite finished my qualification yet. Well, naturally enough, you're going to turn to the more qualified person, but yet what we see is it is completely down to the unregulated experience that one can get on a site. It's not down to what we learn in the colleges, because we don't learn enough in the colleges. It's down to what we get in the site, which is completely down to the discretion of what the employer can tender for. Now, so moving on from that, I think it's important to realise that the customer, when lost my train of thought a bit here. Perhaps coffee and passion.
Let's get some questions from the audience, because I think what you said is extremely powerful and it's very valid indeed with any career that has a very strong practical element. I'm slightly feeling nervous, but I'm going to take the question.
So I agree with him to a degree, because I've got a 16 years old son and I've got a construction company and I don't let him touch it.
Why?
And because I don't want him to go through the education process. Licensing shouldn't be linked with the education process they go through. Practicality, they have to have practical tests and they can be licensed. They don't have to go 4 years, 3 years, whatever that is. Because a lot of builders learn on site, but to be a skilled builder, you need to go through licensing. You still can work. I'm not saying you can't. He's going to get more experience working than going to university. My personal view, he's not a surgeon, so he doesn't need to go through all of this.
Put that thought to Shanaz. I'm sure she has some ideas on I mean, this balance between, you know, what you learn at a practical level. I mean, nurses, this has been levelled at the nursing industry as well. But it's
You're caring for human life, I agree there, but...
but, you know, the balance between the practical and the academic.
I think it's a really good question, and I think it's something that we collectively should address, because we have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people going through construction education. You know, we talk about not being able to attract them into the industry, but they are attracted to the industry. They spend a year or maybe 4 years learning, and like we're saying, what they're learning isn't fit for purpose, but they're going through it, and then they don't end up in the industry after. Right, so if you look at FE, you've got up to 12% that have completed their diploma come into the industry. Higher education at university, 40% come into the industry. So that's your starting point. Impact the way they learn, right? So go in there and make it more practical. Like, I think the industry has a role to play in impacting the way construction is taught. You know, we can teach them on site, and we can change what they've learned at college, but we've got an opportunity where they're a captive audience. They're there to learn, but let's make the learning fit for purpose as a start.
Okay, a question from the back, please. Yes, the gentleman with your hand in the air. It's a leading indicator that somebody wants to ask you a question.
Was it clear? Yeah. Thanks, Mike Lennon from the Building Alliance. You know, I'm going to refer to something that Chris said for the last speaker, but talked about the value that we put against this industry and against vocational skills. I'm fed to the back seat of hearing politicians and civil servants. I had one speak this morning to me who said, people do not want to come into our industry. They've decided that. In fact, people do. And when people come into our industry, for instance, be a bricklayer and earn £60,000 a year, they're very happy. Thank you very much. Yep. We need to sell it, and we're not selling it. We're actually downgrading it all the time. And we've got government and others who are trying to de-skill the industry, bring in modular construction and off-site construction to get rid of the jobs rather than creating the opportunities for huge numbers of young people who are unemployed still. In Birmingham, where I'm from, you know, it's the highest level of youth unemployment anywhere in the UK. Yeah, why are we not capturing that and so doing something about it?
Yes, please.
I wonder if I could just offer something really, and slightly picking up on your previous comment, Luke. But you're right. There's 50,000 vacancies a year in construction. We need those people every single year to meet the demand, and the gap between supply and demand is massive. So we need to make this attractive, a place that it's attractive to come. And lots of people want to come and really do their studies because they get the pride from getting the qualification. And there's some fantastic things out there, like the Skill Build competition, which is having its finals next week, which is the Olympics of the trades that we all need: tiling, plasterers, carpenters, painters and decorators, the day-to-day things that we need. So we're raising the profile that way. But I also wanted just to pick up on apprenticeships is a great route into our industry for the qualifications, and there's things available to support you as employers as well as to support the apprentices. But we recognise that that can sometimes take too long. So things like the pilot for the bricklaying traineeship, which has really reduced the amount of time that someone can take from qualification through to being skilled and site ready, and then go on to a shortened apprenticeship, has been really successful, and trying to reduce the pathways to make them really relevant on site. So for instance, in bricklaying, you have to learn everything from A to Z, but actually if you're a volume house builder, you don't need to learn about Gothic arches. You just need to know how to build to that relevance. So part of our role in CITV is to try and help to set the standards and the qualifications that are meeting the needs of industry, and you to help us to say, this is what I need from a bricklayer at this particular time. Yeah. This is what I need for a carpenter for this particular area. And that might help break down some of the barriers for the young people who are unemployed in the Midlands to come and have a go and think this could be a career for me.
Right, unfortunately we're going to have to stop that particular discussion, and I'm going to swap a couple of people out, so we're going to lose you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and also Luke. Jackie, I understand you're staying. This is right. So I would like to introduce you please to continue this discussion. Charles Simber, who's the founder of BPIC Network, he's going to explain hopefully a bit more about that, and Eddie Tuttle, who's Chartered Institute of Building. Please welcome them to the stage. Hi there. Right, you've barely sat down, but I'm going to ask you as you're sitting down, because this issue has come up about attracting people to the industry, and I've talked about inclusion. It's not very high, is it? How do you change that?
Yeah, no, really good discussion, by the way. Yeah, I think it's a challenge for the industry. Just listening to the questions that we had, I think the last one that we had around making our industry attractive, advertising and etc. I think inclusion plays a huge part of that. In terms of you've got to have different players on the field, if you want different outcomes. The industry's been what it's like now when we talk about lack of innovation and how it's probably not advertised properly because of the of how it's been currently run, with people in the industry. So that alone is also a way to usually attract different demographic people into the industry with different ideas to the table. And that's really what we're championing across.
So you think that it's not perceived as an aspirational choice, and that's the problem, is that it?
It's not, for quite a huge chunk of people, number one, who don't see anyone else sort of making into that industry.
No.
And secondly, also just basic ideas. Ideas come from all different angles, they come from women.
So it's necessary, yeah.
So it's really, really key. It's probably one of the drawbacks, I think, when we're having these sort of discussions, that people ignore to say, if like I said earlier, if you're playing in a football team and it's not performing, you start looking at the players. And I think it's time we look across the industry, who are the key players in the industry, and having better players on the pitch.
And actively attract people. Eddie?
Well, I think we navel-gaze, don't we? I mean, we've had these issues in the industry for ages. I mean, I can go back to the construction industry and my time in the civil service, go back 30 or 40 years. And we've always had problems attracting people into the industry. And for me, it's actually about learning lessons. It's about where are we as an industry? What are the issues? And I think we need to do a lot more work, certainly at school level, working with teachers and others to actually create the right kind of frameworks that actually make the industry a career choice rather than a last resort choice in the way that it's promoted sometimes. I think I was interested in the building safety conference or the building safety discussion earlier because a key part of the Building Safety Act is also about competency and having competent people working in the industry from trades through to professions. I think there's a real opportunity both through competence and actually through the changing face of the way that we deliver through MMC, wider use of digital, to actually address some of the issues that we clearly have got as an industry when it comes to diversity in particular. I mean, the figures I tend to state or use are that 2 to 3% of people working on site are female, and we have a real issue in actually addressing this in a proactive way. And I think the industry has been lazy in terms
Why do you think it doesn't attract women?
Because I think it's promoted in a way as a dirty industry, an old-fashioned industry, and the industry itself, or certainly a number of the tier 1 contractors, have been able to recruit quite quickly and easily from Europe and from other areas in terms of bringing people into the industry.
Can I
So
just
for
interrupt
me,
you?
that's a real issue.
Okay, there is a question here from Rebecca Lovelace, which I think encapsulates it very well. She says the stats quoted for women and people of colour are alarming. They have been for decades. But she's asking about a coordinated effort within the industry to try to change that and to change the branding, to change the culture within the industry. That would be helpful, but with a very fragmented sector, that's quite difficult to achieve, isn't it?
It is, but I think I would use the term, although I represent a professional body, I think we just have to professionalise the industry, the opportunities in the industry, the way that we work in the industry, and I think through that you actually create the right opportunities to move the goalposts.
Right, so what does professionalise mean, Jackie?
Professionalised means skilled, competent, inclusive workforce for the future.
Yeah.
And actually, to answer part of Rebecca's question there, around, you're right, the industry has to work together, not just be representing our individual companies, but us as an industry to really promote ourselves as the place to come. And through the work with the Construction Leadership Council, there is a Changing the Culture work stream, of which Rebecca's a member and other people within FMB are part of, so that we can help some of the smaller companies with tools and resources that help you to become more inclusive, rather than having to start everything from scratch and have this wider industry approach that helps you to accelerate your way forward in inclusivity.
And also, who provides the thought leadership that we're talking about? Who do you think provides that?
I think obviously we're one of them right now. So Federation of Master Builders, there's so many organisations across the industry that really, because the question is, for example, we're asking about women, why they're not being attracted in the industry, but it's not a women issue. It's actually an industry issue, and I think people really have to look at that. For example, if you walk out a lot of building sites today, sometimes you don't see any female toilets, right, on the building sites. Like, no women's going to come to that. It's not. But the other question is, who in the right sense is having that site open in the first place? And secondly, the people that own those companies and are running those building sites, why are they not sitting down and saying, for us it's zero tolerance, we're not going to have this? So it's both. Obviously, companies can do whatever they want, but the whole point of industry bodies is to sort of professionalism, to say it straight and say, we do not accept this. So Federation must be able to say, if you do not have a female toilet, your site cannot open if you're a member of us. Instead of it being some sort of mafia where it's just about fees, and sort of membership fees. Yeah, it needs to really kind of drop back to that. If you're not going to have companies, there's so many companies across the industry, they go past every now and then, loads of new companies, but the industry can actually promote a lot of innovation, so maybe put a bit of competition into other businesses that are up and coming that really want to solve this. You might get a small business that can challenge some of the big builders we have in the industry. That we have real innovation and really meaningful good, but what we have is there's so many giant companies, whether they change or not, they're the only ones that can pour concrete, So you don't really kind of go anywhere if you want to build a stadium, for example, or if you want to build a big highway. But the industry can put a lot of thought into that and into supporting innovation. We're the only ones that really haven't really moved.
You get a broader, this is true in any sector, and I've dealt, and had contact with many of you. You have a broader range of people that you're bringing in, you just get better ideas. It's really that simple. Anybody else want to ask a question? Not you. Yes.
Yeah, my question is about at what age do we need to be encouraging young people to consider construction as a profession, be it on the tools, like Luke here, or in a management role, whatever role you like. So I've got a couple of kids, they both took me to a school bill, and it's very, very much aimed at academic endeavour. That's the impression I've got.
What school is?
School is, 100%. And I don't get the feeling that schools would consider promoting an industry like construction at an early age. And I think also children start to consider making choices for GCSE and then maybe for A-level. For me, I wonder, would it be best to talk to children at year 7 when they're 11 years old, start introducing this idea to that construction might be an industry for them? There's plenty of young people whose brains aren't wired academically. It's kind of thing what Luke was getting at, I think.
But they are wired creatively.
Creatively, absolutely.
Yes, and I think that's a general problem in this country, that we don't get that.
So back to my question basically is, how young should we be talking to potential young people to work in industry?
Eddie, would you like to answer that?
Well, the younger the better. I would actually say 11's a good starting point. I actually like the model in Germany where schools and companies are actually engaged from that age onwards, and therefore there's an apprenticeship line or a degree apprenticeship type approach taken to what's required in the future. And I think we've got to move the goalposts ourselves in this country, because we do tend to repeat the same mistakes and go around the same circles. And if we're going to address it, we've got to address it in a different way.
Yeah, these things have to tackle it. Yes, please.
Just to help reinforce what's been said, and again, from the Institute of Carpenters' point of view, I think we should talk about this issue. I think we've got to recognise in the room that around this years, for sort of 30 years, we took our eye off the ball of craft skills training, apprenticeship training. It's only very recently become the buzzword, but the problem is communication with schools hasn't been done. There's a huge mountain to climb, let alone the colleges themselves, who are supposed to be able to work this through. We talked a little bit about what is the structure of the courses, that they need all the help they can get to make it relevant. But we're almost starting from a rather clean piece of paper as a nation, about saying, you know what, let's look at the German model. Good point, they've got it spot on. We actually are scratching around trying to figure out how should we do this. It's very fragmented. So earlier into schools, and who's going to do that? Who's going to talk and really make this so compelling? Who's actually going to do it, and how? Because schools have been basically judged on their academic achievements, and actually now there are two pathways being presented: a technically related, craft related apprenticeship route, and yes, where relevant to the university route. But the schools have not been geared up to that at all. That needs to be really enforced and explained. And you know, how can we expect school staff to be tuned into that
Absolutely
message?
not. No.
Yeah, so that's my point.
Yes, please. Just behind. So with my glasses on, I can't see anything. You can see anything as well. Sorry. Yes. No. You go first, please.
I was just going to say, building on what they were saying, is the change in language that...
Would you mind saying who you are and where you're from?
I'm sorry, Janet Johnson, Bridge.
Hi.
Is there a requirement for a change in language even when we're approaching schools, so that you get the diversification in people of colour and the whole diverse route? So changing the language that we use even in that education piece, so it's not just aimed at men, or not just aimed at this. Do we need to change the whole language?
The language around it, yes. Good question. And you were going to ask a question as well.
Sorry, Jordan Carr, working for Building Control, Cammy Guarantee. I would like to reinforce Gary's point by saying I only kind of fell into the construction industry through my dad, who was a house builder. So I kind of there at 16 started working on site. It's only at that point I then realised there's other routes within building itself. I didn't realize you could be working building control and all the different parts that are part of a whole branch. And then since then, I kind of worked in local authority building control, then did a course actually in conjunction with CIOB, with the local authority, and now I'm a building control professional, which you didn't think would be possible. So I think similar to what Gary and Luke say, it's just not shown as an option to young kids leaving school. You're going to get pushed into you do this, and then look at college and the A levels, and it's not unless you have many people you know in your family that are in the industry, then you wouldn't look at these other.
I think it has to come from industry organisations when they go into schools, doesn't it? And think very carefully about the point you're making about language.
Yeah, I was just going to say on building control, it's a fine example of creating a professional career and recognising building control as a profession in its own right. So, yeah, that's one of the excellent things that's coming through the Building Safety Act in effect. So we're very much working on that and making that happen.
I'm going to come back for final thought, Jackie.
Well, you might get some reassurance around. It's not going to be a quick turnaround, and it's all of our jobs actually. But there are things happening at a policy level to enable. So in Wales, a new GCSE is available for the built environment. That has never happened before. That means it's a career choice, and actually in a women's careers advice session that we ran recently, we had people come into that room saying, I'm not really interested in construction, and by the end of it 2 of them had changed their GCSE choices to say, actually I'm going to do the GCSE in the built environment. T levels have come in England. In Scotland, the structure for encouraging people at a much younger age to get involved is happening. So these aren't overnight things, they're starting to happen. But to answer the original question, we must be influencing right from day one people so that this is an industry that can be for them and for people for all walks of life.
Yeah, no, for me, just to sort of get on the points regarding apprenticeships, etc., I think the industry also has got to look on the industry side, because how they capture those apprenticeships. Because a lot of the big companies, when you're talking about plumbers, etc., they take up money but don't actually employ them. So that's left to the subcontractors, and at times with subcontractors, they cannot keep them. So they just kind of get lost in the system after the first. So in a policy level, I think government or anybody's, they have to look at the people who actually employ the trades, so the carpenters, the plumbers, etc., the electricians. How are they captured? Because a lot of them get lost in the system because the people that are actually applying to get them, the main contractors, don't actually employ them. They employ them and then they pass them on to their supply chain. So it's got to be looked at that. And in small businesses start there, which are 90% of the industry, they cannot keep those overheads, so they're hiring flyers, project to project, and then quite a large number of the apprenticeships, etc. Again, they're lost and then they never come back into the industry. So I think that's what we look at on the policy.
I think just to answer that one really briefly, the tier ones are responsible for their supply chain, so there's work that can be done there.
Yeah.
Eddie, Jackie, I must thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all panelists. We'll watch networking, and I think this question that you brought up there of language and how we talk about the industry and within it is very important. So maybe we'll discuss that a little bit over something to eat. I see you back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
My question, you're not talking practical level here. It's all nonsense.